What's up, nerds? It's your boy, the OG GM, coming to you live on a lovely Saturday afternoon here at Site B. It is the 22nd day of April, 2023. It's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It is gorgeous outside, though there does look like there's fog rolling in. Go away, fog. And I guess I got to address this. So Ben Riggs opened a open letter to Wizards of the Coast that he published on a magazine. Okay, so yeah, I don't just write them a letter directly. Don't post it on a magazine, dude. I mean, okay. Ben Riggs, if you don't know what he is a self-proclaimed Dungeons and Dragons historian. He wrote a book that supposedly is the definitive guide to D&D history. Of course, anybody who's seen Secrets of Blackmoor or any of the other more definitive guides to the history of D&D may disagree that Mr. Riggs's book is the definitive guide. It has received both positive response and negative response. I haven't read it, so I have no basis. I've seen Secrets of Blackmoor. I've spoken to people who are deeply entrenched in the history of the hobby, so I go by that. Maybe I'll read his book. I don't know. So I wrote a letter, and he starts the letter with how to make Dungeons & Dragons a billion-dollar brand. And I'm going to toss it out there right now, Mr. Riggs. That is your very first mistake in this letter, using Hasbro's wording and Cynthia Williams' wording that Dungeons & Dragons is an under-monetized lifestyle brand. Dungeons & Dragons, in my opinion, is not a brand. Coca-Cola is a brand. The NFL is a brand. Honda is a brand. Dungeons & Dragons is a geeky little game about elves with sticks that you play with your friends around a table once a month. That's it. Nothing else. It is a fun little game. Okay? So stop it with this lifestyle brand. So already, that's your first mistake. So he's written this letter on Gizmodo. I suppose it's a place to other places. It's very much, oh, Wizards of the Coast, you're wonderful. Everything you've done with Dungeons & Dragons is great. But here's how you need to, get and keep the fan base and get and keep, so you can reach that $1 billion goal. Why $1 billion? Where $1 billion? Where does that? Well, that is coming from, of course, you have 5 years to make $1 billion a year. So even though people don't believe me, as we know, this has been on the docket since almost 2 years ago, where Hasbro has placed this demand that Dungeons & Dragons make $1 billion a year plus every year, starting in 2023 and ending June 2027. What happens if they don't make it that much money by the expected time, that 5-year plan that both Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford have now admitted exists? Well, I think it's safe to say that Wizards of the Coast, as we know it, will probably no longer exist. Hasbro will realize that they are not making them the expected money. Why? Again, where does $1 billion come from? Well, between 2018 and 2021-ish, Wizards of the Coast made a lot of money because of Magic the Gathering. And then when a certain global pandemic hit, a lot of people were playing D&D for short periods of time. So Dungeons & Dragons saw a brief, unbelievable surge in sales. Add to that, to the general media coolness Dungeons & Dragons was experiencing between 2018 and 2021 because of Stranger Things and Critical Role, it was seen as $1 billion brand. Even though most of that money was actually Magic the Gathering money, D&D was making money. Well, Critical Role and Stranger Things was making money. But now that series of events has stopped, obviously, and not surprisingly, D&D experienced a huge financial drop. Add to that the god-awful way Wizards of the Coast has been shepherding D&D and shepherding Magic the Gathering for the past couple years. If you've been following my daily posts, the stock dropped, the yearly money dropped. Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro had to fumble wording to make it sound like to the investors it actually was making, but it definitely did not make as much money this year as it made last year, and it did not make as much money last year as it made between 2018 and 2020. So in there was a $1 billion year. There's no ifs, ands, or but about it. Wizards of the Coast had $1 billion year. Hasbro foolishly expects them to now make that every year, specifically from Dungeons and Dragons. Hasbro knows Magic the Gathering will make them money. Also, Hasbro knows they don't really need Wizards of the Coast to make Magic the Gathering. In fact, considering the current opinion of Magic the Gathering and the way Wizards of the Coast is handling it, it probably would be better for Magic the Gathering's long-term survival if Wizards of the Coast no longer had anything to do with it. And Hasbro knows that. So right now, Hasbro is expecting Dungeons and Dragons to make $1 billion by the end of 2023, $1 billion by the end of 2024, $1 billion by the end of 2025, and $1 billion by the end of 2026, and going into the first half of 2027, $1 billion. If it doesn't, well, Jeremy Crawford, they're still looking for somebody to replace you. The job's still posted. So, yeah. So there is where Ben is getting that $1 billion idea. And this lifestyle brand idea that comes from the media that Cynthia Williams has been trying to project, that it's an under-monetized lifestyle brand. Now, in this article, he, of course, gushes about how wonderful D&D is, how his history and his association with D&D and watching kids play D&D, typical pro Wizards of the Coast, pro D&D. What he neglects to mention is, of course, the recent history, well, the long-term history of Wizards of the Coast treating its fans like crap, and Wizards of the Coast not understanding who its fan base is. In fact, he mentions the media disaster that was D&D Direct and the creator content conference thing. So I'm going to read this, because if I don't, people will say, how come you didn't read it? And I'm going to try and keep as much as my personal opinion on it. Obviously, this is just one man's opinion. And if he thinks Wizards of the Coast is going to read this and take it and say it, they might not, who knows. Dear Wizards of the Coast, hi, I wrote a history of your company back when it was called TSR. I also teach 7th and 8th grade. So for the past 15 years, I have watched years after years as kids discover and go gaga for D&D. That is completely past 15 years, maybe the past 10, maybe 8. I don't remember a bunch of kids going gaga over 4th. But yeah, kids go gaga over D&D when they first discover it. That's not the problem. It's the problem of maintaining the fan base. I'm rating this because I want you to succeed. Frankly, I think all true-hearted D&D fans want to see your company do well and produce fantastic products that are profitable. No, we don't. That's part of the problem, especially after January. So I eagerly watched your media event these past few weeks, namely D&D Direct and the Content Creator Summit. There are some really good ideas there. Well, that's yes, Ben. But I will be the first to agree with you. Wizards of the Coast has had good ideas. Even 4th edition was a good idea. 3.5 was a good idea. Everything they've tried to do with 5th has been a good idea. I think I have said a couple thousand times now about Wizards of the Coast good ideas, as opposed to how Wizards of the Coast implements their ideas. Because somewhere between the point of time where that idea is written down on a piece of paper and the point in time where we are made aware of the idea, there is multiple levels of stupid that those ideas go through. Case in point, every single solitary choice they made with 4th edition. In general, I would rate them as meh. I think D&D has room for exceptional growth, and none of these ideas are going to fuel that kind of increase. No, it doesn't. The market's not there, dude. It would take a same series of events that happened between 2018 and 2021, 2022, for D&D to experience the same level of growth. D&D sales are abysmal right now. Look at the numbers. There are literally copies of Strixhaven, Golden Vault, Dragonlance, whatever, sitting on shelves in game stores that have not moved. Tabletop role-playing games are actually a titanically difficult product to make lots of money on. Drop $150 on rule books and campaigns that you can play for years without ever making another purchase. Weird, right? We D&D Day fans actually have no need to ever purchase anything from you ever again, yet nearly all of us want to. Well, Ben, you're obviously not aware of Wizards of the Coast plans to take the entire market digital and to institute this digital marketplace so that people will be buying the stuff. They kind of have to be buying stuff as opposed to physical product like modules and books and stuff like that. They will probably cease to make them, not for any sinister reasons, simply because it's not cost effective. And we're running out of trees. And I'm not sure if you know this, but Dungeons and Dragons physical product is made out of paper. Paper comes from trees. There are less trees now than there were a year ago. There is 25% less trees on the earth than there were 10 years ago. And there's 75% less trees on the earth than there was 20 years ago. Every year, the amount of trees is decreasing by 1 to 50%. So at this rate, there won't be enough trees yet left to continue to produce physical product unless we find an alternative like, I don't know, hemp, insects, Soylent Green. I understand you're trying to get more money from your players. Yes. Again, that's fine. I can't wait for a gorgeous Atlas of Neverwinter or the Edgin the Bard socks. Again, D&D is a lifestyle brand. I want D&D socks. I want D&D underwear. I want D&D the breakfast cereal, D&D the flamethrower. That's what Cynthia Williams and Hasbro is counting on, that D&D will sell as a brand. It is not a brand. And while T-shirts with Drizzt on it will sell, they won't sell the way people want it to. And while a gorgeous $200 Atlas of Neverwinter coffee table book will sell, it won't sell at the levels Wizards of the Coast has been told it has to. I hope your VTT is so fantastic that I want to use it every day and twice on Sunday. Doubtful, simply because the technology isn't there to back that up. Anybody who's sat at a game with, the phone and the laptop knows that the technology of the VTT is only as good as the internet and the machines you're using, which means it's still going to be paper. And it is now a fact. It has been proven by other people besides me. It is simpler and easier to look the stuff up in a book than it is to try and find it online. So until they fix how that information is addressed online, physical product is always going to be something we prefer. And when physical product ceases to exist and we're told, well, the only way you can buy it is online and you have to go through the same DLC online shopping experience that you would with, like, say, Pillars of Exile or whatever. Nobody's going to want to pay you that kind of money, especially with all the other handicaps that Hasbro is attaching to their product when the third-party publishers are out there doing the exact same thing better. So, I don't know about the future of the VTT. Will people use it? Yeah, but I mean, unless Hasbro does what they says they weren't going to do and make it so the competition can't do the same thing, Roll20 and all those other guys are already ahead of them. Still, will any of this grow the gamers' player base exceptionally? Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro is counting on people to look at Dungeons and Dragons as a video game. Ben even admits that. I understand a lot of you have backgrounds in video game, which makes sense. I would caution you here as well. D&D is not a video game. The virtual tabletop will not make it a video game. 100% agree with you on this one, Mr. Riggs. D&D is not a video game. You need to refrain from your thinking. D&D, do not think of D&D as a product. 100% agree. Don't even think of it as a brand. 100% agree. Definitely don't think of it as a video game. 100% agree. D&D is first and foremost tabletop role-playing game, and tabletop role-playing games are an original and radical medium. A tabletop role-playing game is something new to do with paper and pencils in the human minds that was invented in 1974. Imagining acting was invented in 1974, and that we were 50 years into seeing how acting will change culture. That is the potential tabletop role-playing game revolution. It's not gonna, no. Then that should have been your opening statement, Ben. One of the most phasing features of tabletop role-playing game is that it's infinite. Absolutely agree. If one started a D&D campaign in 1974 with the first set of rules, one might still be playing the same game today, which is to say telling the same infinite story. Yes, there are still people doing that. We know that. It's called the OSR. And most video games, by contrast, can be finished and once complete require a new purchase, unless you're playing Minecraft. Shameless plug for my separate Minecraft channel. If you haven't checked out my Minecraft channel, check it out. Video games are finite. Tabletop role-playing games are not. They are a bottomless bottle of vodka. Well, that's not good wording there, Mr. Riggs. Are you telling me that you're equating D&D to alcohol? Probably not a good term. I would have just said they are a bottomless bottle of fun. Imagination that never breaks down or doesn't need gas. But, maybe people don't understand that, but they would understand a bottomless bottle of water. So how do you make money off of a new medium, which after an initial purchase never requires another? It's tricky, but it can be done. Yes, it can be done. Hasbro is always broken even on Dungeons and Dragons. It's the expectation that it will make more and that everybody on the planet will stop playing every other game they're playing and jump on D&D, which is not going to happen. The most successful models are sports and religion. Ooh, not a good choice, Ben. I want to be clear here. I am not saying that Dungeons and Dragons is a religion, nor am I not making fun of disingenerating religions or sports, nor am I making some truth of claim for D&D. Too bad you said it, and there's people who are out there who do think D&D is a religion. And the key to unlocking a bigger, brighter, and more profitable future for D&D is not at Wizards, not at Hasbro. Ironically, it isn't with the players. No, it's with Dungeon Masters. Yes, because Dungeon Masters will spend most of the money. Players spend a lot of money too. Do you know how much players spend on figures and dice? Across the world, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of game masters ask people to try D&D for the first time. They explain the rules. They set up D&D nights. They figure out who's bringing the chips and who's bringing the dip. They literally sell your product for you. Yes, we do. And in return, we are what? Called racist, sexist, homophobic, grognards, old men who don't belong in the hobby anymore. And we do it for free. Consider this simple math. If there are only 10 dungeon masters in the whole world, but every year each DM convinced one other person to become a DM within 20 years, you have over 20 million dungeon masters. That's not the problem. The problem is keeping them at the table. The problem is not that D&D is out there and people become aware of it, and when it experiences a media upswing like it has since 2018, people are going to be like, I want to try this game. It's keeping them. You're going to make money by radically increasing the number of people who play D&D. Sadly, again, Ben, that's not going to happen because the series of events that allowed 2018 to 2020 to happen are never going to happen again. And the chances of another Stranger Thing Critical Role explosion of popularity happening again in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years, difficult. I mean, the closest would be what Critical Role is doing on Amazon. As you may know, there is a dungeon master shortage. People are intimidated to DM. Yes, they are. They worry about knowing the rules. They worry about mastering the adventure or writing their own. And now they worry about receiving death threats, Ben. They worried about being called racist and sexist and homophobic and old men and being told there's no place for them in the hobby anymore. That puts a brake, perhaps even a ceiling on D&D growth. Yes, it does. Someone may be a Critical Role fanatic, but if they can't find a D&D game to play in, they may never become a D&D fan. Again, except for a large percentage of the critical fans don't play and have no interest in playing. So how do you make a DM's life easier? I don't know. Change the way you're addressing the wording towards the public. Stop having Wizards of the Coast be the shepherd of the game. Acknowledge that there are third-party developers out there who've been keeping you alive since day one. First, you are currently producing the best version of D&D that has ever been in existence. Wrong! And you know everybody will disagree with you, even some 5e fans. It is definitely a good edition. Is it the best edition of D&D ever made? I don't know. There's no way to judge that, dude. For every person who says it's the best, I can find you 5 people, if not more, who will tell you it is a piece of crap. And then that will lead to 2-year-long Twitter wars. Furthermore, having watched dozens of 12-year-olds play through the starter set, I can also tell you the product does a fine job of teaching the game. D&D is too hard has been the #1 complaint about 5th. That said, you should produce 10 to 20-page pamphlets that would be available for free on your website of the most important D&D rules. No, you should produce 10 to 20-page pamphlets that you make available for free that you send to people so we don't have to print them out. Continue using the internet and YouTube to create content explaining D&D and your products. Yes, but absolutely, but in shorter, less insulting ways. Maybe even sort of audio adventure summaries. So instead of reading, a DM could listen to prepare. Yes. Maybe read by an existing D&D celebrity. Oh, dear God, Ben. No. But outside the starter set, your other adventures and campaigns are wildly mixed bag. God, yes. Ben, acknowledge the fact that there are third-party content creators out there that are making better stuff. I know that countless droves of D&D fans will buy your books no matter the quality or content. That is absolutely true, but we don't know for how much long. Making lifelong fans require producing fantastic adventures. A good campaign both inspires DMs to run it and makes their lives easier. I don't know how your books are produced, but based on the final projects I've seen, you should do the following. Campaigns should have 1 to 3 authors. Add more with only great caution. Absolutely agree. Campaigns should be pitched by authors and designers. Considering the, culture consultants that are now the designers of the hobby, I think we have seen with Strixhaven, Spelljammer, Radiant Citadel, Witchhaven, that perhaps the designers should not be the best people to pitch the games. You should play your game designers like they are working on video games, and you should give writers royalties. Oh, dude, yeah, totally. I think everybody who works in the hobby would agree with you. There should be a constant format for campaigns that carries over from book to book. So everybody writes the book the exact same way. Everybody agrees on the exact same format. Everybody agrees on the exact same formula. All Wizards of the Coast product look the same. Sure, yes. Time for playtesting should be concluded in your production shell. It should be measured in months. Absolutely. Your books need to be shorter. Incorporate 21st century RPG layout and design. Shorter, yes. Art punk 21st century layout and design, maybe not so much. Return to the box sets. Absolutely 100% loosely. Create handouts, maps, character portraits, in-game journals, and clues to go with your game. Also make PDFs of those goodies available. The return to the box set would be great, Ben. I don't think it is feasible for them to make it because that just requires money and production that no longer exists the way it did back in the 80s and 90s. Paper's running out. What else can you do? You can make sort of a dungeon mastering graduate school with perhaps special projects only available for purchase to graduates. Oh, yes, of course. That's a wonderful idea. Pay me money to give you a degree that says you are a DM. You know Wizards of the Coast will do something like that if they haven't yet. And you know people will be like, oh, $60 and I learn how to be a DM. Can you run DM contests at gaming conventions? Winners get swag, trips to Renton, honor, glory, etc. Can you create some sort of Academy Awards for DMs? There is one. It's called the ENnie Awards. It's called the Gen Con Awards. It's called the Gamma Awards. There's an awards ceremony with celebrity presenters. Already exists. That all may seem absurd, and how does it lead to profits? Well, consider in a world with 20 million Dungeon Masters, you probably have 1 million players and 113 million people who watched the Super Bowl in 2023. If D&D is a game with a fan base on par with that of the NFL, it's not. Imagine the profits from t-shirt sales alone. That is what Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro is counting on. Furthermore, consider that these suggestions are not about replacing what you are doing now. It should be. They're doing a horrible job. Rather, such as refocusing on the DM will augment your current efforts. More DMs and more players make your VTT more useful and more profitable, for example. So that's the way it looks like from where I sit. I wish you the best of luck. The movie was awesome. Yeah, the movie was great, Ben, and yet it's making them no money. No, look, I got comments. Oh, and they're from Mar Harkman. Let's ignore them. In theory, the first movie should have been that, but what Wizards of the Coast made is a horrible mistake. The same failing as Games Workshop. They are raising prices as a good way to increase revenue that only works if customers are still willing to pay the increased price. Yeah, Mar Hockman. Now the idea of making a digital marketplace with MT actually kind of works, but it needs to be affordable or it'll be rejected. How come you didn't start by reading it? I don't know, because I'm a jackass. Weyerhaeuser has been planting their own curated for us for decades. It's what they cut for paper now. Tablet version TTTs need to become more common. They need to be able to work. TTRPG kind of sort of interacts with video games, but isn't bound to it. So the problem is not that they don't exist, Muffin, it's that there would have to be some magical way to make me having OGGM VTT on my phone, you having OGG VTTM on your tablet, Mar Hockman having it on his laptop, and then the person who's hosting it having it on their desktop, and all of them being able to access the interweb at the exact same speed with the exact same download, and all of it being able to easily be achievable. And if you've heard my story about the guy who took 20 minutes to figure out how to add plus 1d6 to his character on D&D Beyond, you know, it's still not there. Me and my siblings are making a table for digital maps for D&D games. We spent at least $40 buying minis for our current game. Critical Role isn't really D&D anymore. It's adjacent, but not the same. Certifications like this are dumb. Mar Hockman, I spend $400 a month on minis. Up your game, Matt. We've been using Kinder Egg toys as D&D minis. As you should. Kinder Egg toys are awesome. Now, there's technically nothing really wrong with anything Ben's saying, other than Ben is living in a pro Wizards of the Coast Hasbro bubble without having all the facts available to him, which for somebody who claims to be a D&D historian, maybe he needed more facts. I don't know. The problem is it can't, unless, I mean, I'm not saying it can't, because silly shit happens all the time. But there would have to be a cascading number of series of events in order for Wizards of the Coast to make as much D&D money as they did between 2018 and the end of 2022. And compared to that, to the D&D money between 2014 and 2018 and 5e money, it's nowhere near what it was making in 2018. And then you have 4th edition money, which, well, you know, it's 4th edition. There was no 4th money. And then you go further and further back, and you're failing to acknowledge the fact that there is a huge third-party market out there. That is what has always been supporting Wizard D&D. Are you saying I don't use facts? Get off my land. So, yeah, I mean, I knew I had to read this letter and comment it before anybody else read it. And we know certain people will be like, oh, well, Ben Riggs said this, so this is what it actually said. Or Ben Riggs said this, so he's a Wizards of the Coast shill. So 70% of me agrees with Ben on most of his topics. But it can't happen. Again, there would have to be a cascading series of events for D&D to make Wizards of the Coast the amount of money Hasbro expects it to make. And even if you add in the brand money, i.e. t-shirts, whatever, how much of that Wizards of the Coast actually makes? I mean, if I make a D&D t-shirt on my Etsy store, no, Cal. No, do not watch his videos. Bad, Cal. Bad. So I guess the question is, can and will Hasbro do anything Ben suggested in order to make it easier for DMs to get players more than what they're doing now? Can they? Sure. Yes, absolutely. Everything Ben said is feasible. Will they? Probably not. One, it's just not financially in their best interest. Personal opinions behind currently whether the market is, plus that our you got to remember a lot of this stuff that isn't even made in the States, it's made overseas. Our relationship with those countries right now isn't great. Shipping is still a year behind. So there are still shipping crates sitting on docks in Korea from a year ago. Hopefully there's no food in those. So that's a factor. And Hasbro knows that's a factor. Hasbro has alienated their Asian market after signing the $30 million for Netflix for Power Rangers and Transformers. And then they sign a separate deal with Paramount for Transformers. And then you see what they're doing with Power Rangers, and Asia's going, wait, that's not what we agreed on. The current CEO of Wizards of the Coast wants Wizards of the Coast to make D&D a brand. I think they've sort of just kind of like, whatever's happened with Magic is going to happen. The current CEO of Hasbro is like, you need to make this amount of money every year for the next 5 years. We told you this was going to happen in 2020. The fact in 2023 you're still surprised is kind of silly by now. So in closing, I don't have anything directly wrong with Ben. I don't hold him in any, ill will. I think there are certain facts that he missed. I think there are certain events that happened that he chose to either ignore or he's not aware of. And I think as much as, pie in the sky, he would like Hasbro to have Wizards of the Coast shepherd D&D into the next decade in a positive, proactive way. That's not going to happen. The very first step needs to be that Wizards of the Coast needs to exit itself from the political market. No more inclusion, no more blah, 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 blah. Just make good, well-researched, well-written, play-tested, well-edited, easy to digest and understand standalone product. 4 or 5 a year. And then when the inevitable Daniel Kwan comes forward and complains about it, or the inevitable on the other side of the fix, Max or, Double D or I complain about it, because we know we will, don't respond. Don't respond. When book number 17 comes out in 2027 or 26 and somebody writes, says, oh, this book did this, this, and this, and it's blah, blah, blah. And somebody on the other side goes, oh, no, this book was blah, 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 blah. You will feel compelled to roll Jeremy Crawford out of whatever vat you're keeping him in and respond. Do not respond. Just keep doing your job. Make good product. 4 or 5 a year. That's it. Nothing else. Build up the product through an advertising campaign, support the product once it's out there, and then don't respond to anything. Don't respond. Don't have any more creative content things. Don't let, people go off on 60-minute rants about how that plant is racist. Now, just like, nope, we did it. We're done. Bam. Please put your suggestions in the suggestion box. Garaby's latest video on CR's new game are hysterical. No, bad, Cal, bad. He's so jealous that CR is doing a game. I would figure he'd be upset, that CR is finally doing what I said they would do 2 years ago. Netflix revision of the Cleopatra reign was so bad the government of Egypt sued them. Yeah, well, that Once and Always Power Rangers 30th anniversary special was a disappointment. I was like, dude, the second half of Beast Morphers was a better nostalgia homage to the past 30 years than this was. Anyways, that's it. I've wasted 35 minutes of your time. Thank you, Cal and Mar and whoever else jumped on this. I'll post a link, so if you want to read the article yourself. Do you agree with Ben? Do you disagree with Ben? Again, Ben, no offense, buddy, a lot of your ideas are good, but a lot of them seem to show sort of a naivety over the current state of the fan base, as opposed to the perceived fan base, as opposed to the state of the inevitable doom of Wizards of the Coast. The best thing Hasbro could do is to acknowledge third-party publishers and kind of just let Wizards of the Coast go. You don't need Wizards of the Coast to make D&D. Wizards of the Coast isn't doing anything that everybody else can't do, and consistently better. I mean, come on. When was the last time a D&D product was nominated for any of those awards Ben was talking about? It hasn't been. That's it. It is 1:30. I talked about this way longer than I thought I would. Thank you all for being a part of this. If you appreciate me, let me know. If you don't appreciate me, let me know. If you haven't checked out my other channel, I've got a Minecraft channel. You can join Mar Hockman on that Minecraft channel and telling me, things I missed. I will kill those invaders, by the way. Don't forget, this is my job. So if you want to support me, the best way to support me is through the Ko-Fi, my sponsored coffee, or to head on over to Big Geek Emporium and shameless self-promotion time. Pick up my latest issue 11 of Minions on a Mission. It just went live. 10 pages of Minion-specific gear, 2 pages of King Slime activities, and 2 pages of brand new rules, gear-related rules, including what happens when the gear breaks rules. And then issue number 12 is going to be more like a regular zine. It feels like that's kind of what people want. So have a little bit of everything in it, kind of more like Dungeon Magazine, as opposed to just each issue focused on one monster. Because let's face it, there's only so much I can say about slime. So if you want to support me, that's the best way to do it. Also, I have a Patreon. Going forward, that's probably going to be the best way to get my stuff. I don't know how much longer, sadly, I'm going to be putting my stuff on Big Geek Emporium, because I want to make as much money off of it as possible. So sign up for the Patreon, guarantee yourself 2 products a month. Head on over to Big Geek Emporium, and I'll see you all Monday. Until then, you know what I'm about to say. So on 3, 1, 2, 3, get off.